Welcome back to Meticulous Mechanic. In the last video, we got this all disassembled. And I did get the bench cleaned off yesterday when I was done getting ready to put everything back together. I'm going to be using this high temp disc brake wheel bearing grease. It has a lithium complex base. This is the main lower seal. That's the part that's facing the ground. So when I install it, I just want to get a little bit of grease on this area here. If you get too much, this will bend because there's too much grease. You just want to have that seal tightly with a tiny bit of grease along there. It'll slide on here like that. And then you want to tuck it into this little groove here. Like that. Get a little bit of this grease out. I like to put a tiny bit on the Q-tip like this. Then I can get just a little bit where I was talking about, which is not there. It's right on this lip here. Just a little bit right there, because that way when it spins, it'll turn well. And I don't want to get any grease on the other side because it'll just attract dirt. So I'm going to do that all the way around. I don't care if I get a lot up here because that's where the bearings go. Let's do that all the way around. You want to pack this as full as possible in here. Kind of smoosh it in with your fingers and go all the way around like that. Now just take the bearing, slide it down. You can cram a little more down in here all the way around. This is the upper seal, and I'm going to do the same thing. I just want to get it right in here where it rubs. I don't want to get it on the other side. It'll just attract dirt. I'll do that all the way around carefully. If you get some on this side, just wipe it off. Maybe wipe it off with a simple green rag too. I just want it on the other side. I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on these threads. Go ahead and put some grease in here. All the way around. That upper seal runs right along this surface here. I don't want to get the grease up on this top part, right on this ledge, just on that ledge there. You don't need much here because it's just so that rubber can slide easily. I'll do that all the way around. So I'm going to fill the rest of this up pretty full, because if you have this full of grease, like pretty heavy, then dirt can't get in there because the grease is occupying the space the dirt is trying to get into. If you get a little out on this outer part, just wipe it off. I'll just do that all the way around. I'll do the exact thing down on this lower race. Now I'll just slide this up in the hole. Hold it up all the way. Next, I'll put the bearing in. I already packed this one up over there on the bench. And the cone, I put a light coating of grease on this Next goes on the seal. Make sure it's sitting down in there. That's good. And the first lock nut, I did put a little grease on the inside of these threads too, and on the outside, just so I can get it apart later. Now you can let go from the bottom. If you have it in there correctly, it'll spin freely, and then there'll be no play on it. So I'm pushing back and forth here and up here. So that's in there good. Even though I was careful, I still got a little out here I'm going to wipe off. There's a little grease right in there I want to get out. I just get all this grease off because it'll just attract dirt. All right, that looks good. The rest will go on just like we laid it out yesterday. So a rubber washer, another one of these. And this, those will have to line up in the notches. So actually we're probably gonna have to tighten this down a little bit. So at this point, it's a matter of getting this turned down to the proper point, because right now it's too loose. You can see how, if it was really too loose, see how it goes up and down like this? And it would also wobble. So you want to spin this down till it stops. Now if you go too much, if I tighten this too much, then it doesn't turn very well. So you got to find the exact right spot for this. The manual says tighten this down to 58 Newton meters, which is almost like a front axle nut. That's way too tight. And then you loosen it up and you go down to 13 Newton meters, which isn't very much. So I'm just going to bring it down till it stops, and then just a little bit more and feel it. I'd say that's a little too tight, so I'm going to back it off a hair. Better just a hair too tight than too loose because of the forces that are on this. So let's try that. I find this rubber washer kind of strange because normally on a bicycle, that other lock nut here, you would just lock these two together. So you're putting this rubber washer on there for some reason, which probably works because you have this device here, which once you put it on here, then the two can't spin relative to each other. So it actually fits in right where I want it. So that's good. All that's left is this washer and the top nut, which are going to go over here once we get this back on. These were lined up finger tight. But if I put this here and I tighten the other one down until I get the notches to line up, actually there's one notch, two notch, three notches, that's pretty much it. Now if we can get this back on and see what it feels like. The only reason I can think of for this rubber washer in it here is so when you tighten these two together, you can get this little tab to line up. But once this is all tightened down, it can't really back up. It does feel really good. They're super smooth and super tight. This does feel smoother than when I took it apart, so maybe it was worthwhile. Because I was just talking about yesterday how the grease didn't look that dirty. In the first video in this series, repacking the steering head bearings, I had a video entitled Removing the Headlight. You might be able to not do all this, take all these blinkers and everything out, but I kind of wanted to just take it apart just to see what was under there. So my theory, if you do this again, is you would just take out this bolt here, that's holding the headlight on, and then the one on the other side, then you would unhook it from this rubber mount that I showed you in the other video. And then if you could get everything to come out of the way, because all these wires are attached to the triple tree, then theoretically you could leave all the headlight and stuff on here. The only difference would be the headlight would be hanging out here. You would still have to hang the triple tree by a zip tie, and you'd still have to get the handlebars out of the way. The next thing to go on is this triple tree, so I'm just going to cut my zip tie. Bring it back over here. You don't want to ding these threads up if you can help it. And looks like I'm going to have to slide the whole thing forward, including the handlebars, to get it over. Try not to stress out any of my wires. That'll go there. Washer and the nut. Spin the nut all the way down it. The tightening torque is 110 Newton meters. That's like the tightening torque on the rear axle nut on my DR650 Suzuki. The bottom and the lower triple trees at this point turn relative to each other. When I get my fork, I'll put it back in here and it'll come up through here, and then that'll get everything clocked. For now, I'm going to take this 27 millimeter and just tighten it down a little bit. And I'll do the final tightening once I get the forks in. Now I'm going to reinstall the handlebar. I did label this one right with an arrow pointing forward so I don't have to think. Now I can undo the handlebars from this clamp over here and then set it down where it goes. Move it out of the way like that. The right one's going to go like this. It is nice not to have to think sometimes, because I don't want to hold all this stuff and try to figure out which way it goes. Here's the left one with the arrow pointing to the front. So I'll just spin those down, and then I have the marks here that I put so I know back and forward and the correct rotation without thinking. So line up the marks. Goes right there. You can use this as long as you don't go all the way. It was pretty hard to spin by hand, so righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. I didn't go all the way with that impact. I'm going to just get them close with this. I want to go back and forth in a crisscross fashion. Then I'll get the torque wrench out. So that's close. Going down till it stops, and barely a little bit. If you didn't mark your handlebars with the L forward, there's actually punch marks on the upper corners. The torque spec on these 4 bolts is 22 Newton meters. I'm just going to leave them finger tight for now, because I might have to take the handlebar off to get down to this and get a socket on there and get the 110 Newton meters on it. Now it's just a matter of getting all this stuff back on.